term is psychotronic weaponry. Weaponry that has been designed to interact with the human nervous system in order to remotely pick up on someone's neural network or EEG, and not only receive that and monitor it, but manipulate it and place it back into the victim to control their emotions or control their actions or bodily functions, for that matter. The other more
EEG, if you guys are familiar with that, that's something that they use when they're reading or mapping your nervous system, your heart rate. If you go into, it's similar to EKG, but it's a different output just for a different part of your body. But when you're having this phenomenon where these people are actually seeming like they're psychic, they've got somebody literally reading your EEG, as he just said, and they can tell and determine like what you're thinking, your thoughts. And once they have that computed, it spits it out like a printer, and then they can like manipulate it and spit it back to you. But at the same time, they can also read it and have an understanding of like what you're about to do, what your motives are. Like for instance, the other day when I showed you guys that video about me thinking about going to Target and me thinking about going to Chili's, I had the thought. I didn't say I was going to do it to anyone. I didn't speak it out loud. This is how they're able to show up in places before you get there. This is how they're doing that.
A recent term we have for that is EEG heterodyning or EEG cloning. The difference between EEG heterodyning and EEG cloning would be, let's say, me remotely receiving your EEG and then duplicating it and putting that in another person to give them your same thoughts or feelings or physical reactions. EEG heterodyning would be receiving your EEG, manipulating it to put it back inside your head to give us a desired physical reaction or emotional reaction.
And exactly, I mean, give me an idea of how this technology works.
I wish I could give you a good example of how it works. I know Robert Duncan worked on some of the projects. I mean, he claims it's a very complex, mathematical situation that does it. The bottom line, though, at least from what I've been told, is that it's mostly based on Robert Malik's patent of remote neural monitoring, in which he found that if you shoot two dissimilar frequencies into the human brain, that the human brain will actually create an interference frequency as it tries to duplicate the two dissimilar frequencies, and the interference frequency that gets transmitted back out of your brain can be decoded and your EEG digitally manipulated out of that. Now, and that patent came out in like 1974. It was Malech, Robert Malik. A good example of how it works. I know Robert Duncan worked on some of the projects. I mean, he claims it's a very complex, mathematical situation that does it. The bottom line, though, at least from what I've been told, is that it's mostly based on Robert Malik's patent of remote neural monitoring, in which he found that if you shoot two dissimilar frequencies into the human brain, that the human brain will actually create an interference frequency as it tries to duplicate in like 1974. It was Malech, Robert Malik. And it was actually invented as a way to monitor pilots. That way, if you had a pilot that was falling asleep or a pilot that was starting to hallucinate, they could see that remotely and then stimulate the pilot to wake him up or to bring him out of a delusion.
All right, so you see, he said if a pilot was falling asleep, they could see that remotely, right? That is how they've been manipulating and using this weaponry against me to know when I'm falling asleep so that they can sexually assault me and drug me. This is how they know that I'm falling asleep. This is also how they've been able to try to keep me awake when they don't have access to me. They've done that as well. And this is how they're doing it. They're doing it remotely. You see what he just said. He said that when pilots would fall asleep or start to hallucinate, they could see that remotely and then send them a stimulation to keep them awake or to bring them out of a hallucination. This is how they're using this stuff in sex trafficking against myself and against other people who are victims in this manner. They're utilizing this ability to see when you are asleep. So they don't have to have a camera in your house. If you go to a hotel, they don't have to have a camera in the hotel. They're monitoring your nervous system. So when people ask the question, how can this be happening to you and you're still, walking about, you're still free to do this and do that, this is how. They're using this technology and this weaponry to commit sex trafficking toward different individuals. And it seems seamless and it seems touchless. And that's the point.
Especially fighter pilots that are on, continuously long missions. It appears to be mostly being done in that way. Now, Antonio, Texas, author of The New Breed, Satellite Terrorism in America. The book is about my experience with a female target in San Antonio, Texas, that was the victim of what we think is a satellite-based tracking and harassment system based on directed energy weaponry and electromagnetic weaponry used by the government. My impetus for writing the book was to expose the fact that this technology is being used nationwide and globally in an apparent experimental fashion to harass certain people. This started about 2006, was ongoing with the female victim that I wrote about until her name was changed and she was moved out of the city where she was being targeted. The perpetrators of the targeting were a private investigative group owned and operated by a former FBI agent who hired nothing but his relatives to work for him.
Now you hear what he said, right? Private investigator group. So it wasn't like technically CIA and things like that. And you just have to be smart. There's a lot of people on this platform who claim to be target individuals who have backgrounds in the military, who have backgrounds in private investigating, who have backgrounds in security. And these individuals, you're not able to have this kind of work and this kind of background and not be associated or not be a part of this filth. So you need to be giving the side eye to these people who have this background, who are claiming to be targeted, who are claiming to be affected. Because as I said many, many times, I know personally of several individuals who are claiming to be targeted when they're really perps. And they have backgrounds in this kind of work, private investigation and military work.
We spent a lot of time doing counter surveillance on this group to make sure that we had the correct identities. Once their identities were turned into the police, they then began to target me with some stalking and break-ins into my home. They did victimize me with some stalking and some home break-ins. As of lately, in other Texas cities, has been identified by myself and others independently of me, and is a former FBI agent running a private investigative group. I've never technology and electromagnetic weaponry that allows them to remotely track a person, apparently via electromagnetic impulses picked up from their brain, as well as basically torture them with electromagnetic weaponry that can cause increase in heart rate, muscle twitches, heartburn, severe headache, blurred vision, and attacks on the central nervous system. This is actually being reported by approximately 300,000 other people nationwide and appears to be experimental in nature.
seems to specialize in tracking and targeting single women for sexual assault. In the case of the girl in San Antonio that was written about, she was having either rohypnol or GHB, both date rape drugs, placed into her bottled water and other food sources in her home. She was being drugged with these date rape drugs and sexually assaulted while on them. These drugs are well known to completely inhibit memory. She often thought that she was having nightmares of being raped, when in reality she was truly being sexually assaulted. This is a common finding among female targets nationwide and globally. Most of the groups that have access to this technology, while they may be using it in other means, seem to be using it for sexual assault as well. This type of targeting usually...
So you see what he just said? That this is typical. And they typically use this this technology, sex traffickers, for sex trafficking or sexual assault. But then you have everybody on YouTube acting like they don't know what I'm talking about. People who I'm telling my story to, how can they be doing this? These all these individuals acting like they don't know this shit goes on are perps. They are perps / pimps. And they're involved in this sick sex trafficking scheme. And that is the reason why they're acting like they don't know this. This video is over 15 years old. And it's one of the very first videos I seen when I first found out about gangstalking. Because I was researching what this shit was and what was going on. And you mean to tell me people that are on here that are claiming to be targeted individuals for years don't know about this? And you see where he said that shit started? Texas. Yeah.
Starts with organized stalking, which is stalking by individuals that are unknown to the target, unlike stalking by an ex-spouse or a loved one. This is well-organized stalking that got its debut during FBI COINTELPRO work in the